Welcome to History with Herodotus, where the tapestry of time is woven with the threads of human experience. Today, we embark on a journey through one of the most complex and pivotal conflicts in European history, the 30 Years' War. This devastating struggle, which ravaged the continent from 1618 to 1648, was a maelstrom of religious fervor, political intrigue, and military might, leaving deep scars that would take centuries to heal. The Holy Roman Empire, a vast and fragmented entity comprising hundreds of states, cities, and territories, was a simmering cauldron of tensions. The Peace of Augsburg, established in 1555, had provided a fragile framework for coexistence between Catholics and Protestants. But it was an uneasy peace, threatened by the rising tide of religious extremism. In the midst of this volatile landscape, the figure of Emperor Matthias, who ruled from 1612 to 1619, played a significant role. A devout Catholic, Matthias sought to consolidate his power and impose uniformity on the empire, but his efforts were met with resistance from Protestant princes and cities. One such prince was Frederick V, Elector Palatine, a charismatic leader who would soon find himself at the epicenter of the conflict. The defenestration of Prague, an event that would spark the war, was still a few years away, but the underlying tensions were already palpable. In 1617, Emperor Matthias, in an attempt to assert his authority, appointed a Catholic governor to administer the predominantly Protestant city of Prague. This move was deeply unpopular among the Protestant nobles and burghers, who saw it as an attempt to suppress their faith. As the situation continued to deteriorate, Frederick V, Elector Palatine, emerged as a champion of Protestant rights. His marriage to Elizabeth Stuart, daughter of King James I of England, had strengthened his ties with the English monarchy and bolstered his position among European Protestants. However, this alliance also made him a target for Catholic suspicion and hostility. The Bohemian Estates, a representative assembly of Protestant nobles and burghers, had been seeking greater autonomy from the empire, but their demands were met with intransigence by Emperor Matthias. As the standoff between the Bohemian Estates and Emperor Matthias continued to escalate, the situation finally reached a boiling point on May 23, 1618. On that fateful day, a group of Protestant nobles and burghers, frustrated by the emperor's intransigence, stormed the royal palace in Prague and threw two high-ranking Catholic officials along with their secretary out of a window. This dramatic event, known as the defenestration of Prague, marked the beginning of the 30 Years' War. The victims, remarkably, survived the fall, but the incident sparked a chain reaction of violence and retaliation that would engulf the entire continent. The defenestration of Prague was a clarion call to arms for Protestant princes and cities across the empire who saw it as a beacon of resistance against Catholic oppression. Frederick V, Elector Palatine, now found himself at the forefront of the conflict, as he was elected King of Bohemia by the Bohemian Estates in August 1619. This move was a direct challenge to Emperor Matthias's authority and sparked a wider conflict that would draw in major powers from across Europe. As the war spread, the Protestant Union, a loose confederation of Protestant states, was formed in 1620 to counter the Catholic League, a coalition of Catholic princes and bishops. The Protestant Union was led by Frederick V, who now found himself facing off against the formidable forces of the Catholic League, led by Duke Maximilian of Bavaria. The war would soon become a complex web of alliances and rivalries, with major powers like Sweden, France, and Spain becoming increasingly entangled in the conflict. One of the most significant events of the war occurred on November 8, 1620, when the Catholic forces of the Holy Roman Empire, led by Duke Maximilian, crushed the Protestant army at the Battle of White Mountain, just outside Prague. This decisive victory gave the Catholics control over Bohemia and led to a wave of repression against Protestants, including the forced conversion of many to Catholicism. The battle marked a turning point in the war, as it shifted the balance of power decisively in favor of the Catholics. The Edict of Restitution, issued by Emperor Ferdinand II in 1629, further escalated the conflict by ordering the restoration of all Catholic properties and territories seized by Protestants since the Peace of Augsburg. This move was a direct challenge to Protestant rights and led to widespread outrage and resistance across the empire. As the war continued to rage on, the Swedish king, Gustav II Adolf, entered the conflict in 1630, bringing with him a highly disciplined and well-trained army that would prove to be a game-changer on the battlefield. The Swedish intervention marked a significant shift in the balance of power, as Gustav II Adolf's forces won a series of victories against the Catholics, including the Battle of Breitenfeld on September 7, 1631. This crushing defeat marked a turning point in the war, as it gave the Protestants a much-needed boost in morale and momentum. The Swedish king's military campaigns would take him deep into Catholic territory, and his army would eventually reach the outskirts of Vienna, the imperial capital. As the war dragged on, the empire was plunged into chaos and destruction, with entire cities and towns being laid waste by marauding armies. The population of the empire was decimated by famine, disease, and violence, with some estimates suggesting that up to a third of the population perished during the conflict. The once mighty empire was now on the brink of collapse as the war continued to rage on with no end in sight. In 1635, the Treaty of Prague was signed, which attempted to bring an end to the conflict by granting limited toleration to Protestants and restoring some of their rights. However, the treaty ultimately failed to achieve a lasting peace, as many Protestant states refused to sign and the war continued to simmer on. The conflict would eventually draw in even more major powers, including France, which entered the war in 1635, and Spain, which continued to provide significant financial and military support to the Catholic League. As the war continued to drag on, the Swedish king, Gustav II Adolf, was killed in action at the Battle of Lutzen on November 16, 1632, marking a significant blow to the Protestant cause. Despite this setback, the Swedish army remained a formidable force, and under the leadership of Axel Oxenstierna, they continued to fight on, eventually securing a series of victories that would pave the way for the Treaty of Westphalia. This landmark treaty, signed on October 24, 1648, brought an end to the 30 Years' War, establishing the principle of sovereignty and recognizing the independence of states, marking a significant shift in the balance of power in Europe. The Treaty of Westphalia had far-reaching consequences, as it not only ended the war but also laid the foundation for the modern system of international relations. As the German historian Leopold von Ranke once observed, the Treaty of Westphalia was the first general peace, which recognized the coexistence of different faiths and the principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of other states. This marked a significant departure from the previous era of religious wars and imperial ambitions, as Europe began to move towards a more secular and pragmatic approach to international relations. The 30 Years' War had a profound impact on the European continent, resulting in widespread destruction, demographic decline, and economic devastation. The war is estimated to have cost the lives of between 4.5 and 8 million people, with some regions experiencing population declines of up to 60%. The war also led to significant changes in the balance of power, as the Holy Roman Empire was weakened and new powers like Sweden and France emerged as major players on the European stage. Today, the 30 Years' War is remembered as a pivotal moment in European history, marking the transition from the medieval to the modern era. It is seen as a conflict that laid the foundations for the modern system of international relations, with its emphasis on sovereignty, non-interference, and the recognition of different faiths. The legacy of the 30 Years' War can be seen in the modern nation-state system, with its emphasis on sovereignty and territorial integrity. It can also be seen in the development of international law, with its focus on non-interference and the protection of human rights. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, remember that, to understand the present, we must first understand the past.